Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kuf Lamed Vav 136 in Bava Basra. We are at the Mishnah, so we're going to get started with that. I'm going to share my screen and we can begin. So
So how
today
many rabbis today?
we're going to have a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, and then that's going to lead us to a discussion. And we're going to have some Rashbam. I don't think we have any Tosfos that we're going to be doing today.
What happened to that Wednesday thing?
What was the question that we wanted to?
Because about the woman, remember?
Yeah,
Remember you were talking about something about
the giving a gift.
yeah.
So we were talking about giving a gift, and that you can basically the bottom line is that well, you know what, let's take a look and see in this Mishnah. We're going to talk about giving a gift to somebody while you're living and how one does that. So again, the Mishnah is going to detail how one can transfer assets after death, and do so right now when a person is healthy. So Akosev Nechasav Levanav, if he writes his properties over, his inheritance over to his sons. And why would you do that? So Rashbam explains. Take a look first, Rashbam, on the Mishnah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam on Kuf Lamed Vav and Aleph. Hakozim Nechasav Levanav. Bari, a healthy person, Shirotza Lisa Isha, who wants to get married. But he doesn't want his properties to be encumbered by the obligation that he is taking on when he marries his wife. Because when one marries somebody, so when a man marries a woman, he takes on certain obligations under the tubah, and those obligations are guaranteed by all of his properties. And so now he has these properties. Pen yafsidu banim, but he doesn't want his existing children to lose out to the new wife. So sheyesh lo mi'ishto rishona, that he has from a first wife. V'rotza lichtov lahem, and he wants to write it over to them, nichas of his properties, la'achar moso, for after he dies. But he wants to be able to to benefit from those assets while he is living. So the idea is he wants to sign it over. So what does he do? So let's go back into the Mishnah. Now, again, continuing on, first line of the Mishnah in the again, third to last line of the narrow lines on Kuf Lamed Vav and Aleph. So tzarok sheyichtov mehayom l'achar misa. You need to write from today and after death. Now, what does that accomplish? Back in that Rashbam, if we go back into that Rashbam, it's 1, 2, 3, 6, 5 lines down below where it says Mishnah in the Rashbam. You have to write from today until and after death. Demashba, that what does that imply? Mehayom yehe kanoi lecha haguf levado. Today, I'm conveying to you the underlying asset. I'm conveying to you the ownership of the ground, for example. Misa, and then after the person dies, tehei nigmeris hamatana, the present will be complete. Shetochal gam haperos la'achar mitati, that you can then eat the fruit after I die. Ava below mehayom, but if I don't say from today, lo natan lahem klum, I will have given nothing to those children. De'ein matana l'achar misa, because there is no possibility of giving a gift after death. De'bahi shaita, because at that moment, ein lo chelik behen, the person doesn't actually own the item. We don't own anything after we die. We take nothing with us. That he would thereby be able to cause somebody else to make a kinyan on it, to acquire it. So as a result, that's the explanation. So now we understand Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's all Rabbi Yehuda. So again, Rabbi Yehuda says that if I want to convey something to my children for after I die, what I say to them is, I'm giving this to you from today and after my death. That way, it underlying belongs to them, and then they get the whole thing after I pass Ad Mea V'Esra.
Wow.
Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Eino Tzarech. What does it mean by Eino Tzarech? Take a look in the last Rashbam on the Mishnah. The last Rashbam says, Eino Tzarech lichtov mehayom. You don't have to write from today. You could just say that I'm giving you these assets for after I die. The time of Mefarsh B'Gemara, and the Gemara is going to explain Rabbi Yossi's reasoning. I believe that we will get to that later today. So let's take a look. So now what happens now in this in-between time? I've given property A to my children for after I die. And now what happens if I try to sell it or they try to sell it? So akosav nechasav livno la'achar moso ha'av einu yachol limkor mimdei shehein ksuvin leben va'ben einu yachol limkor mimdei shehein ksuvin shehein b'shus ha'av. So when it comes to selling it, if I've written over the properties for my children, for my son, for example, well, then I'm not able to sell it because I've written it over to my son, and my son's not able to sell it because it's still in my possession. So machar ha'av, what happens if I do sell it? So there are a couple of different ways that we can understand the line that I just said. We could say that legally I'm not allowed to sell it, and this statement is effectively a lichatchila statement that maybe post facto I'm able to, and what we're going to discuss in a moment is the post facto. That's one way to understand it. The Rashbam and the way that we will focus on understanding it is as follows: that if I want to try to sell the entire property, all of the rights that are associated with it, I'm unable to do so. Doesn't make a difference lichatchila b'di'evid because I've already written it away. Meaning I've given field A to my children for after I die. So as a result, I can't give away. I've already given it to them. So I can't sell to you, Stan, something that I don't have. And so that's the way we're going to understand it. And similarly, my children, they don't have the rights to the fruit right now. That's something that I retained for myself. And so as a result, if they were to try to sell it, they don't have the right to sell it. But what do they have the ability to sell? That's what we're going to turn to now. So machar ha'av, if the father sells it, mechurim ad shiamos. The only thing he's sold is the rights to the produce until he dies. Machar haben, and if the son sells it, the purchaser gets nothing until the father dies, because the only situation that the purchaser gets it is after it can benefit from any aspect of the land is only after the father dies, because until then the father gets all of the produce that's associated with the land. Okay, so that is our Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to wonder and say, listen, what about a Mishnah that discusses divorce? This language of from today and after death has a total different ramification. Here we say that that's what allows me to transfer something for the future by saying from today and after my death. But when it comes to a divorce in that situation, the rules are completely different. How could we say, why should it make a difference, the fact that I say from today and after my death? Hatanan, we have a Mishnah. When it comes to from today and after my death, when it comes to get ve'eno get, it's a divorce and it's no divorce, meaning that we're uncertain about the status. As we pick up with Rashbam, the first Rashbam on the Gemara, get ve'eno get. Deshema kach amar me'achshav yehe get im amut, that it could be when I say mehayom alachar misa with respect to my divorce, what I mean is that that if I die, and really I'm saying if I die before you, retroactively the divorce will take effect from today. That could be one way of understanding mehayom ulachar misa. O Dilma, or maybe mahaderka hadar bay. I'm really retracting what I said. First I said mehayom, And then I said, no, I don't mean mehayom. I mean la'achar misa. I mean after I die. And then if in fact I was retracting, so all I was trying to say is that the divorce should take effect after I die. The aim get la'achar misa. There is no divorce after the person dies. Meaning, once the person's dead, that's it. Exactly. So Hilchah, exactly. That's it for this world. Let's put it that way. Well, that's it for this world. Hilchach havya suffik. So now we have a suffix migureshes. We have an uncertainty about whether or not she's divorced. Be'im pashta yada v'kabla kiddushin mi'acher. And so now, if that woman has gone and accepted a marriage from another person, sricha get mishneyen. She needs to get a divorce from both of them.
Wow.
So that is what we mean by get ve'enu get. V'imes. And now, if the husband were to die before that get were to happen, choletzes v'lo misyabemes. She needs to have chalitza, and she can't be taken in yibum because maybe it was a good divorce. And if it was a good divorce, she's not subject to yibum. And if she's not subject to yibum, marrying your brother's widow is prohibited in the Torah. It's only one situation that you're allowed to marry your brother's widow, and that is if he has no children and they were still married at the time of his death. But now that maybe she wasn't married to him at the time of death, they have to do chalitza. So why, and if over there it causes us to be uncertain, meaning in that situation when you say from today and after my death, we're unsure. Do you mean just after my death, or do you mean that it's conditional from today if you die? And yet here we don't have any uncertainty. We simply say that that's an effective mechanism of gift. So why the difference between these two cases? So hasam misapgalan itanahavi ichazarahavi. So there, in the case of get, there's an uncertainty that we have. Is the person making a condition, or is he retracting? But aval hacha, but here, hachi kamar, there's no question about his meaning, because there's only one meaning to the words from today and after my death in the context of a gift. And that is guva kantni mehayom, the object itself you acquire immediately, peira la'achar misa. But when it comes to the fruit, that's what you get after the person's death. Okay, so that is the first topic, and now we understand why Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah requires the language of mehayom la'achar misa. What about Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi
Didn't we
Yossi,
say yesterday that when this particular phrase mehayom ad achar moto that he had to be he had to be muksak, he had to retain the karka, right? And if it was an immovable property, whereas the pay, or was it? We had that discussion yesterday.
yeah,
We
in the
made
discussion
a
yesterday,
distinction.
well, first of all, the discussion yesterday was talking about a situation where the person asked that it also be written. And so
Right.
that was the situation yesterday. If the person had just said "Mehayom achar misa," everything would work. The issue is that he was saying that I wanted it to be written as well. And so that became uncertain. Was he trying to create a stronger right for the recipient? Or was he saying, if in fact you can complete the transaction as a written transaction, well, then go ahead. But I only want it to be a written transaction. I don't want it to be a deathbed gift, because a deathbed gift doesn't require any writing. In fact, we should say that an oral deathbed gift is like it's as if you had written a document and conveyed the document. And so that was what the conversation that we were having yesterday. So two important differences between the discussion that we're having now and the discussion that we had yesterday. Yesterday, we were talking about somebody on their deathbed. I mean, we did touch on somebody who's well, but we highlighted that basically it doesn't work. And the second is that they were not just making an oral statement, but they also said to write it down. And so we became unclear. And where we concluded yesterday is that the halacha is that assuming that the person who was giving it made clear that the writing was also to support the rights and the possession of the recipient, well, then we would complete the transaction, even if the person died before we had a chance to write anything down. Okay, so that is the Rabbi Yehuda's position of from today and after death. Rabbi Yossi Omer Eino Tzarich. Rabbi Yossi says you don't have to write from today, even if you just said after death, then it will transfer immediately, and the underlying asset will, the produce of the underlying asset will transfer after the person dies. Okay, so Rabba bar Avuha chalash. Rabba bar Avuha was not well. Al legabe Rav Huna v'Rav Nachman. So Rav Huna and Rav Nachman went to visit and be mevaker cholim. Amrle Rav Huna leRav Nachman. Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, "Boy minei halacha Rabbi Yossi o ein halacha Rabbi Yossi. Please ask." Because I guess you're the leader here. Please ask Rabba bar Rav Huna whether the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi or not. In our Mishnah. So Amar Le, time of the Rabbi Yossi lo yadana. 1 second. I don't even understand the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi. Halacha ibai mine. So how can I ask Rabba Baravua whether the halacha is like him? Amar Le, at boy mine I halacha ilo. And the time ana aminalach. You ask the question whether the halacha is like him, and I'll tell you the reasoning. So boy mine, they asked. Amar Le, and Rabbi Baravua said, Haki Amar Rab, this is what Rab said the halacha is. Halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is, in fact, like Rabbi Yossi. You do not need to write Mehayom. Basar Danafku, after they left. So Amar Le, Rav Huna explained to Rav Nachman, Hainu Taime de Rabbi Yossi. Here's the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi. Why do you not need to say from today? De Amar Zmano Shel Tashtar Mochiach Alav. When you have this in a written document, because it's a written document that's going to convey real assets, real property. So in that document, it has today's date on it. And so as a result, if I say here is a gift and it is for after my death, well, then the date on the document shows that it's from today. That's the implication of it. And so as a result, that's Rabbi Yossi's position. And Tanya Nami Haki, and we actually have a brisa that shows that Rav Huna's explanation of Rabbi Yossi is correct, because it's wrote as the brisa say, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Eino Tzarich, you don't need to write Mehayom, Mimneshes Manu Shel Shtar Mochiach Alav, because the time and the date in the contract shows the fact of what it is, of what that you mean from today. Okay. All right, so that is that. So now we have, now the Gemara is going to clarify the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. So let's take a look and see what they say. So by mine Rava min Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman, B'hakna mahu. What happens if the document says hakna? So let's take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam is it's down into the widest lines of the Rashbam. From the top of the Rashbam, it's 11 lines down. It's the first words on the line are B'hakna mahu. So B'hakna mahu, Bishtar shekasav bo kinyan, if you have a contract, a document that within which it was written that there was a kinyan was made, mi palig Rabbi Yehuda u'matzrich l'mechtav mehayom. Does Rabbi Yehuda still disagree and say that you need to write from today? Umeshum haki kami boile de'ika l'meimar de'bishtar matana below kinyan pligi. Because we could say that when is it that they argue it's only when the document itself doesn't reference the making of a particular kinyan. Kagon shekasav sadai natuna lachla acharmita. If all I write is down in a contract is my field should be given to you, Mark, after I die, umasar lo es hashtar, and then I give you the contract, udekaimalan dekarka nikna bekesef o bishtar o bechazaka, and everybody agrees that a document is sufficient to convey property. So then that's where I need to say mehayom, because if I don't say mehayom, so then maybe that's the only situation, because I don't write in the document that we made a kinyan. However, if I say that in the document that we made a kinyan that Mark would take possession of my property from today, well, then maybe even Rebbe Yehuda would agree that you don't need to say from today. So Amar Lei b'hakna eino tzarach. If you have a kinyan referenced in the document, you do not need to write from today. Rav Papi Amar ika aknaisa tzarach v'ika aknaisa delotzarach. It depends. Don't be so certain. Maybe you do need to write it, and maybe it depends on the following situation. That here's the story. Aknai v'kanina minai. If you write down, I'm gonna make an acquisition. If you write down that that you should acquire it, and then we acquired it, so then lo tzarach. Then you don't need to write it. You don't need to write from today. Kanina minei v'akne. But if it was in the other order, and we said we acquired and then acquire it, tzarach. And then you do need to write down from today. Now, why is that? So that Rashbam is going to explain for us. So let's take a look at the Rashbam. It's two further lines down in the wide lines of the Rashbam. So 13 lines down in the widest of the Rashbam lines, beginning of the line. Akne v'kanina minei lo tzarach. That if, in fact, we first say acquire it, if in the document it writes acquire it, and then we acquired it from him, then it's not going to, you don't need to write the from today. Zeu shekosin b'kol shtar, because this is language that is written in all contracts. Obviously, it's not everyone, but it's most contracts. Shekosabo kinyan shnei kinyanin. That there's two, every contract that has a reference to kinyan in it references it twice. Echad b'tchilas hashtar, once at the very beginning of the document. V'kach amar lanu, and meaning that this is the testimony, effectively, that the witnesses are signing to us. That the witnesses say, here's what the donor said to us. Havu alai edim, get witnesses, v'kanu mimeni, and make an acquisition from me, and acquire it. V'kasvu v'chasmu, and then write it and sign it. V'hainu akne, and that is the reference to acquire it. It's a sort of command. Shehikna la'edim b'kinyan sudar, that the edim should effectively take possession. So if my intended gift recipient is Mark, then Ken and Moshe will be my witnesses, and they will take a suitor, they'll take the pen or a cloth, lift it up, or I'll lift it up, and through that, I'll have given to them, I'll take on the obligation to have given to them the rights to the property. Lizkos lo l'makabel, and as a result, or they'll do it, and they'll thereby take on the right to the property for Mark, matana, as a present, the echad besof, and then we reference kinyan again at the end, besof hashtar, the kinyana min ploni leploni, and there the witnesses Ken and Moshe will write that we then actually went ahead and performed the kinyan that I had asked them to perform. Kechol madekasav, everything that was written earlier in the contract, umefurish le'el, and was explained earlier in the contract. Kida amar lakaman beget pashut, as we will see in the next in a future parak of Bava Batra. Tzarech sheyaksor meinyano shel shtar b'shita achrona, that in the and because the idea is that you return to the main point of the shtar in the last line. The hilkach im kasav berosh hashtar akne ubesefa kasav v'kinyana hainu yifuy koach, that if in fact in the beginning you say acquire it, and in the end you write we acquired it, meaning that you first were commanded and then you did it, that shows a strengthening of the hand of Mark, the recipient. Demashma shnei kinyanim hu hikna, that there were actually two separate kinyanim that happened. V'gam anu kaninu mimenu, meaning, and we also acquired it from him. The kinyan yisera hu yifui koach liknos mehayom, and that additional acquisition is showing an intention to acquire something from today. Aval im kasa barosha shtar v'kinyana, if in fact at the beginning of the shtar it says kinyana, kanina, excuse me, meaning that we acquired, ubisofo akne, and then only at the end it says akniye, so mashma kinyan echad, there was only one kinyan, de perusha kamafarish, and it's just explaining which kinyan it is. The kanina mine, that we acquired it from him. The heich shahari hiknalanu, and how was it that he caused us to acquire it? It's because va'amar kach v'kach ani notein leploni kain nirashita zu be'enai ve'ikar. And this is what my opinion. This is what opinion is saying, and that is the key one. We won't continue with the opinion that the Rashbam rejects. So back into the Gemara. So now we have this opinion from Rav Papi, which says that it's not enough to just reference a kinyan. You have to have a double reference that can be understood as suggesting that two separate kinyanim were made.
Wow.
So Maskif la Rav Chanina Misura. So Rav Chanina from Surah asked the question, Mi ika minda midi da anan lo yadinan v'safra yade. 1 second. This is very complicated because the difference between Akniye, the kanina mine, and kanina mine, the akniye, that's a very small difference. You think something that we don't know, we the rabbis who are studying this don't know like that, that maybe the scribes are going to know. After all, he, as the Rashbam puts it, to anan lo yadinan ein rov chachamim bekian bechiluk lashon zeh. Most of the chachamim don't understand this. You're going to tell me that the scribes do? Well, you know what? She'elunhu l'safrei da Abaye v'yadei. They asked the scribes of Abaye in Abaye's court, and they knew. L'safrei da Rava, and they asked the scribes in Rava's court, v'yadei, and they knew. So actually, they did know, but notwithstanding the fact that they understood and knew what Rav Papi said. When it comes to the halacha, Rav Huna Brei de Rav Yoshua Amar Bein Akniye v'Kanina Mine Bein Kanina Mine v'Akniye Lo Tzarech. Doesn't make a difference which the order is. If you have that double language, or if you have any kind of language of kinyan in the shtar, you don't need to write from today. Ubeduchran piskame dahavi ba'anpana pligi. And where is it that they argue? Only if the witnesses are saying in the contract that this is testimony of what took place in front of us, and they don't reference any aspect of a kinyan. In that situation, it needs to be that they record that I said that I'm giving the gift to Mark from today and after I die. Okay, so Amar of Kahana, Amrita Lishmaita Kamei de Rav Zvid Minarda. I was teaching this in front of Rav Zvid from Naharda, Ava Amra Li, and he told me, Atun Hachi Masnisula. You teach it this way. Anan Hachi Masninanla. We taught the following discussion. Amar of Rava, Amar of Nachman, Bahakna Einot Sarach. So again, it wasn't Rav Huna in the son of Rav Yoshua, but rather it was Rava in the name of Nachman, and he said Hakna. When you have a kinyan reference in the contract, you don't need to say from today. Bein akniye v'kanina mine, bein kanina mine v'akniye. Whatever the order is, it doesn't make a difference. Lo tzarach v'duchran piskame dahavu ba'anpana pligi, and they only argue in the initial situation. So that is the story. So the point is that Rava had asked Rav Nachman the halacha, and then when he was teaching it, he was teaching the final detail. He was teaching the final halacha, not and essentially skipping the whole discussion of Rav Papi. Okay, so that brings us, but the bottom line is that again, if the contract itself references a kinyan, well then we're okay. You're good. You don't need to have also from today. Okay, so the end of our Mishnah reference hakozim nechasav livno la'achar moso. If you write the assets to your son for after you die, and then you sell it, what happens? So Itmar machar ben b'chayei av umeis haben b'chayei ha'av. What happens if the son, who only is getting the underlying asset at death, ends up dying before the father?
Heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid, exactly. It shouldn't happen. So, what happens if the son dies during the father's lifetime and he sold it, right? So now, let's say I'll be the purchaser. So I think I'm going to get it, after the father passes away. But now the son has already passed away, the person who sold it to me. So what happens to me? Well, that's one opinion. And in fact, that's the opinion that we paskin like. So Rabbi Yochanan says we're going to say that the father wins. Lo kana lokeach. The lokeach has bought nothing. So it's a contingent right, and there's a risk associated with it. And I may have lost everything as a result of that. Reish Lakish says no, kana lokeach. The buyer does acquire it. Obviously, he only gets it after the father dies, but he acquires what the son would have had. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lo Kana Lokeach, because Kinyan Peiros Kinyan Aguf Dami. That really, when the father holds on to the rights of the fruit, it's as if he's also holding the right to the underlying asset, even though he's given that to his son. And so as a result, something has happened while he's alive. And so as a result, the rest can happen after the son passes. It's as if he still owns the whole thing. Reish Lakish Amar Kana Lokeach. Reish Lakish says no, the buyer gets it because Kinyan Peiros Lav Kinyan Aguf Dami. When the father retains the right to the fruit, it's not as if he's holding the underlying asset. So Vaha Ipligu Bachadazimna. Now, 1 second. Didn't Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish have this argument already regarding Bikurim? De Idmar Hamocher Sadeo Pharaohs, if I sell my field to Stan so that Stan can get the produce, meaning I've only sold the right to the produce and not the underlying field. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, maybe Vikore. Rabbi Yochanan says, it's as if I sold Stan the entire field, and he has a fully biblical obligation to bring Bikurim. And so as a result, he brings the Bikurim and he recites the Psukim in the Torah, even though those Psukim say that he owns the property, that the property is his possession. But Reish Lakish Amar, maybe the Einokora. And Reish Lakish says, no, Stan has not actually bought the underlying property. He only has a right to the fruit. And those fruit need to be brought up because they're the first fruit, so they should be brought to the base of Migdash. But he doesn't get to recite the Psukim because the Psukim say that he owns the property. Rabbi Yochanan Amar maybe the Kore, because again, Kasavar Kinyan Peres Kinyan Aguf Dami. The Reish Lakish Amar maybe the Enu Kore, Kinyan Peres Lav Kinyan Aguf Dami. Again, exactly the same thing. Why did you need to tell me the same argument 2 times? Once in connection with Bikurim, and here in connection with inheritance. So Amar Lach Rabbi Yochanan, here's what Rabbi Yochanan would say to you, because maybe you might say that the laws would be different in the 2 situations. Afal gafta ba'alma kinyan peres kinyan aguf dami. Even though ordinarily when somebody gets the fruit, it's as if they own the entire property. Hacha itzrich. Here, when a father retains the fruit and gives the underlying property to his son, maybe we would treat it differently. Because I might have thought, Abba lagabi brei akuli achal. He's gonna waive his rights. He's gonna be nice to his son. And so as a result, it's not as if he still owns it. Kamash Malan. That's why Rabbi Yochanan needs to tell us, no, in fact, he does own it. Even in the case of a father giving the underlying property to the son, we're going to say that the father's retention of the fruit rights is going to mean it's as if he still owns the underlying property. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish would tell you, no, the logic is in the other direction. That really ordinarily, when you acquire the fruit, it is not like you're acquiring the underlying property. But haka itzrich. Here, I need to tell you that when it comes to inheritance, that the property is as if it still goes to the son. Because salka daita kamina, I might have thought, kol legabi nafshe afilu b'makom brei nafshe adifale, that when you're giving away the produce, that's when we're going to say that giving away the produce is not like giving away the underlying property. But when you're retaining for yourself the produce, maybe even though you're giving the underlying property to your son, maybe we'd say that because you're retaining for yourself the produce, that's as if you're retaining for yourself the underlying property. And so Reish Lakish says, Kamash Malan, even in that situation, we're going to say it's as if you gave away the underlying property. Because again, he says that when it comes to giving away produce, the Alma, Kinyan Perus, Lav Kinyan Guftami. When you give away the fruit, it's not like, or retain the fruit, it's not like the underlying asset. And when you give the underlying asset, you've given the asset. And so as a result, maybe I would say that here, because he was retaining it for himself, he's going to keep it. No, even if he keeps the fruit for himself, that's not enough. He has to keep the underlying asset if he wants the underlying asset. Okay, so that is the machlokes between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to have two challenges. First, a challenge from Rabbi Yochanan from a brisa, and then we'll have a challenge in the other direction from Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. So Esvei Rabbi Yochanan the Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan challenges Reish Lakish nechasai from the following brisa: nechasai lecha v'acharecha. If I say this property should go to you, and then after you, Yirash Ploni, X should inherit it, v'acharav Yirash Ploni, and after him, Y should inherit it. So then, again, it goes to you, X, Y. So Mace Rishon Kana Sheni. If you die, well then X acquires it. Mace Sheni, if X dies, Y Kana Shlishi, Y acquires it. Mace Sheni B'chaye Rishon. What happens if X dies before you die? So Yaksaru Nechasav Liyorshe Rishon. So the heirs of your heirs will get it after you die, because it never passed to number 2, it never passed to X, and because it never passed to X, it's not going to go to Y. Now, V'im Isa, now if you want to say that in fact the transfer of the underlying property is the Liyorshe no sein mi baile, should it be to the first ones? It should go Liyorshe no sein mi baile. It should go all the way back to the heirs. Because remember, how are we understanding this situation? What we're understanding is that all that's been transferred is the right to the produce. Mm-hmm. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, the right to the produce is a real thing. And the transfer of the produce is as if you transferred the underlying asset. And so as a result, it's as if the first recipient got the underlying asset. And that's why the underlying asset will end up getting inherited by his heirs. But according to you, Reish Lakish, when you pass along the right to the fruit, and that's all that seems to be being passed along right now, that does not transfer the underlying ownership. Well, the underlying ownership means that it's being retained by the original owner. And so as a result, if in fact person X dies before the first recipient dies, well, then it should go all the way back to the original owner's heirs who should get it. not the
X
first
and Y.
recipient's heirs. Exactly, not you, X or Y. So Amar Le, Kvar Tigma Rav Hoshaya Bevavel. Rav Reish Lakish responds, no, Rav Hoshaya has already explained this brisa. Acharecha shiny. When you use the language of acharecha, it's different. That it doesn't just imply that I'm giving it to you, that I'm giving you the rights to the produce. As Rashbam says, fourth to last of the medium lines in the Rashbam, Demashma de guf u peros nasan larishon. The truth is that the acharecha language implies not that I'm just giving you the right to the fruit, but I'm giving you the right to the underlying asset. And I'm going to show you that that's the case in just a moment. V'chein Rami Rabba bar Rav Huna Kamei de Rav. Rabba bar Rav Huna asked that same question to Rav. V'amar acharecha shayni, and he also made the same point that after you is different. That actually does convey the underlying asset. It is not just a transfer of the rights to produce. So now we're going to ask in the other direction, and with that we'll conclude. But Tanya, 1 second, we have another brisa, Yachsaru liyorshe no saying that actually says that the underlying property does get returned to the original owner and his heirs if it gets cut off in the middle. Meaning, again, if I say it should go to X and then to Y and then to Z, and then Y dies before X, well then, since it never went through the entire process, at when it goes to it never is going to go to Z, but rather than stay with the heirs of X, it now goes to my heirs as opposed to the heirs of X. So that's what this brisa says. So doesn't that show that really Reish Lakish is correct? That when you transfer the rights to the produce, you've transferred nothing. So Tanaihi, really, it's all a machlokas Tanaim. The Tanya, nechasi l'chav acharecha leploni. If I say that my property goes to you and then after you to X, the yared b'rishonu machar va'achal, and now the first person eats everything and sells it and has all of the produce. So as a result, nothing is left. Hasheni motze miyada lekuchos. You know what? The Divrei Rebbe. The Rebbe says that the second recipient, X in this case, has the right to go to the buyers and get back the property because I had only conveyed to the first recipient just the produce rights, not the underlying right to the asset. And so as a result, the second guy, the X, has the right to go and get the underlying property back. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says no. Ein l'sheni ela mashashir rishon. The first guy, the second guy only gets what the first guy leaves over. And if the first guy leaves nothing over, tough luck.
Wow.
Tough luck. And so as a result, we see that Rebbe is like that we see that Rebbe says the rights to the produce is not like the ownership of the land. So as a result, that's again that's like Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the rights to the produce are like ownership of the land itself, and that's like Rabbi Yochanan. So Urminhu, 1 second, there's another brisa that seems to contradict this first brisa between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Nechasai l'chav acharecha leploni. Again, same basic facts. I say my property goes to you, and then after you to X. Yoer rishon u'mocha va'ochel. And again, the first guy ends up selling the property and consuming all the resulting proceeds. Divrei Rebbe, that is okay to happen according to Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon, and again, Rebbe had earlier said that you can't consume the proceeds, that the second guy can take it away from the buyers. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Ein l'rishon ela achilos peros bilvad. No, the first person only has the right to consume the produce. So kasha the Rebbe ad the Rebbe, the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. We have an internal contradiction, a double internal contradiction, one within Rebbe and one within Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. The Rebbe Shimon. All right, so then now we're going to answer it. So the Rebbe ad the Rebbe lo kasha halagufa halafeira. Nah, it's not a problem. The first situation when he said that the person can go back, that X can go and take it away from the buyer, that's when the original recipient tried to sell the underlying produce. That's going to be problematic. But if all he's trying to sell is the fruit, well, then he's allowed to sell that because that's what he was given. He can sell exactly what was given to him. And to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel lo kasha. And when it comes to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we also don't have any internal contradiction because halachatchila ha the avad. One is when it comes to lechatchila, that according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, lechatchila, the first recipient's only allowed to consume the produce because he needs to leave over for the X, the underlying asset. That's what because after all, if I say that I want something to go to you, Stan, and then afterwards I want it to go to X, I want it to go to Mark. The implication of my statement is that I don't want you to use up the entire asset. Now you may have the right to use up that entire asset, and b'di'evet, if you do, Mark gets nothing. But when we talk about what you should do lechatchila, you should make sure to leave over for Mark. And so that's the two different things. So even though we have these two machlokot between Rebbe and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, they are effectively speaking past each other. They have their own view. Again, Rebbe says that the rights to the produce is not like the ownership of the land itself, just like Rish Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that the rights to the produce are like the ownership of the land itself, just like Rabbi Yochanan. But their statements are dealing with different concepts. So when it comes to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, you own the entire property. I've given it first to Stan and then to Mark, and Stan owns it now, and he can use it all. And if he uses it all, Mark unfortunately gets nothing, and that's okay. But if we ask what should Stan do, he should only use the produce. So let's take a look and see what the result is. Okay, so Amar Abaye, Ezehu Rasha Arum, who is a cunning evildoer? That if you want to know what you should never say to somebody, is that in that situation, if I give my asset, if I give the X, my field A to Stan, and then I say that after Stan, it should go to Mark, Admei of Esrim, for all of us, that in fact, and now, we'll call him Esav comes and says to Stan, I've got some great advice for you. Please. What you should do is you should sell the field and use all that the proceeds, and that way you get the full benefit of the field. That is terrible advice, because although you will have actually done it, you'll have effectively undermined my wishes, and you've cut Mark out of receiving any of the gift, and that's not a nice thing to do. Correct. And so now that we're here, so the question is what's the halacha? Yes. Well, for that you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. That's how it works. That is how it works. Stay tuned. Same bad channel, same etc.
Well, what is it? What does it mean?
Yeah.
I have one question here. Well, I have many questions, but one question: what does it mean to use the produce? You continue to say he can sell the payroll, but he should use the produce. Produce is payroll, isn't it?
Yes.
So you kept saying he can use the produce. He can give over the payroll, but he can use the produce. I don't know.
No, I don't think I ever said the words in that order. If I did, that was an accident.
You kept saying use the produce. He can use
Yes,
the produce.
the point is that
he gives over the payroll, but he can use the produce.
No, I don't think I said that. I don't, I mean, I can go back
I
and
didn't
hear
want to
the,
interrupt you, but you continue to say that. And I
no,
wondered
no,
what it meant.
no, it's use the produce and the question and give over the underlying asset. Meaning that the point is now you have to tell me exactly when I said it, but if we're talking about the most recent case, so if I give my property to Stan, and then I say it's going to go after Stan and Bava Esrim, it's going to go to Mark. So then if while it's in Stan's possession, according to Rebbe, all he has is the right to the uh, uh, produce. He has no underlying rights. Okay, he can use the produce, and if he tries to sell the field to you, Mark can take it away from you. You can keep that field as long as Stan is alive, because Stan has the rights to the produce for as long as he's alive. But according to Rebbe, when Admei Ezrim Stan passes, so then you need to give the field to Mark, because Mark has the rights to the field after Stan passes.
Well, what does it mean they use the produce? Does that mean he
It
can?
means to eat the fruit from the field.
I'm thinking produce is payroll.
Yes, I use those two terms interchangeably.
That's what I thought, but what I kept hearing was he can keep whatever the case was. There are several cases where he can keep the payroll, but he can use the produce. And I'm wondering what's the
No.
I was getting confused.
You're getting yourself confused.
I was confused because I kept
Yes,
hearing that.
because that's not what I said. So I mean, well, I'll go over and I'll double check and listen to the recording, but I don't think that's what I said. So the point is that there's the underlying asset, and then there's separately the produce. The fact that I transfer to somebody the right to the produce, that's the question. The debate between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is over whether or not, when I transfer the right to the produce, am I also effectively transferring the underlying right as well?
The right to the property.
The right to the property, exactly. And so according to Rabbi Yochanan, we say that that's not according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's effectively, it's like I'm transferring the entire property itself. Again, it's on the screen, right? The buyer, and so as a result, if the son sold the property during the lifetime of the father, the buyer doesn't get the underlying property, never gets the property, because the father retained the right to the produce. The right to the produce is like owning the essence of the land. And so as a result, the father's the owner of the essence of the land. The son has only a contingent right that never came to be because he died before the father. And Reish Lakish says, no, the right to the produce is not the owning of the essence of the property. The owning of the essence is exactly what the father had transferred to the son. And so the son owns the essence. And so as a result, the son's able to sell that essence. And so as a result, when the buyer buys it, he's successfully purchasing it. And now, and again, this machlokus between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish translates into a machlokus between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rebbe says that again, Rebbe says that the rights to the produce is not like ownership, just like Reish Lakish. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, the rights to the produce are like the ownership of the land itself. And so it's just like Rabbi Yochanan. And so as a result, when it comes to somebody who says, my property goes to you, you can, and after you to Moshe. So now the question is what can you do with that property? According to Rebbe, my gift to you is effectively just the produce. And so as a result, if you were to try and sell that field to Mark, you would be unsuccessful because Moshe would be able to take it away after you pass away, Admei Esrim, because the only thing you could sell is the right to the produce, because that's all you've been given. But Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you have everything. You have the right to everything. Now, you shouldn't use everything because, after all, you know that I'm giving it to Moshe after it goes to you. But that's the situation. So those are the different opinions. And again, that we seem to have two different opinions in terms of what Rebbe said, and we clarified it. The point is that you're allowed to sell the produce, the right to the produce, to Mark. You can sell the property for the rest of your life to Mark, and allow Mark to eat the produce from the field, but you can't sell the property forever. And that's why Moshe could come and take it away from Mark Admei Esrim after you pass. And so that's Rebbe's position. And then Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's position is, no, you own the right to the produce. As a result, you own the underlying, it's as if you own the underlying asset itself. As a result, you could sell it away to Mark. You could sell the property forever to Mark if you wanted to. Now, you shouldn't do that, because lichatchila, you know that my gift for you was only for your lifetime and was not meant that it was not meant for you to use it all up. You shouldn't, therefore you should make sure that something gets left for Moshe. But if you choose not to do that, if you act as the cunning evildoer who advises you to suggest and advises you to sell the property and use it all up, well, then it's tough luck for Moshe, because you have the right to the produce, and the right to the produce, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, and I believe is going to be how we paskin, you have that right. And so as a result, if you sell it to Mark, you've sold it for forever.
Now, this would be in a case where this initial transfer, gift, sale, whatever, is not written down specifically. But if this is specifically written down, right, then he or she does not have the right to break up the property and the
it doesn't make a difference whether it's written down. In fact, it has to be written down, because otherwise you don't have any kind of property right, because that's the evidence that you have that I transferred you to the property. The method of transferring of the property was using this contract. So no, it's even if it's written down, this debate applies in either case. As long as what's written down is that it goes for you for your lifetime, and then after you pass, it goes to Moshe, that's the situation that we're talking about. According to Rebbe, all you have is the right to the produce. You don't have the right to the underlying asset. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, no, you have the right to the produce, and because you have the right to the produce, that is effectively giving you the right to the underlying asset.
No,
and
but
again,
if he writes
that's the machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan as well.
If the donator, whoever initially writes in the
I'm the donor,
star, whatever, if the person who donates gives it, sells what, if the person who has the property initially, and if he writes in this star contract, whatever, and he says, I am giving you the underlying, selling them, the underlying, transferring the underlying asset to you, specifically writes, in addition to the payroll, and then you must transfer the underlying asset and the payroll to the next person. That should be a
no, that would be an invalid transaction, because I don't have the ability to give you the the question is sort of, how do we deal with the answer that Reish Lakish gave and the explanation of Rabbi Oshaya, because it could be that in that situation, we follow what Reish Lakish is saying, according to Rabbi Oshaya, that after you is different, that it implies the underlying property and the produce are being given. But the bottom line is that that is a different case from the one that we're talking about. We're dealing with a case where it is clear that my intention is giving you only the rights to the produce. And the question is does that conveyance alone give you the right to the underlying asset? And that's the debate between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and that's the debate between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. If you actually write down that I'm giving you the underlying asset, that's a different situation, and it's not clear how the halacha would be.
Right. So we've had this discussion before, whether whether if something is specifically written down, this parameter, that, but this parcel of land, this, that, and if it's specifically written down, then that becomes the effective transfer. So this is a little vague. We're saying, well, I'm giving you the payroll, but we don't know whether the underlying the karka is given or not given.
So it's important to distinguish that this is not about an uncertainty. This is not. This is about the definition of ownership. It's not as if we're uncertain about what my intention is. My intention is clear. I intend to give you only the rights to the produce. In that situation,
so that's clear then. But if he were to write or give,
no, but even though I've been clear on this, I want to make sure that it's understandable that you're following. That even though I'm clear that I'm only transferring you the rights to the produce, we have the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. We have the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and they disagree in the two separate things. Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Reish Lakish, like Rebbe, that they disagree as to whether or not the conveyance of just the right to the produce effectively gives you full ownership rights.
But that's the uncertainty. We don't know whether.
No, it's not an uncertainty. It's a machlokas.
Well, a machloket is based on some measure of uncertainty. We don't know what he means.
It can be completely. No, that is not. It is not necessarily based on some. It's based on an understanding of what it means to be the owner.
We don't know what he means. We don't know what he means.
No, we know exactly what he means. I'm the one who gave it. I'm giving you the rights to the produce. That's it. And then the underlying rights are going to go to Moshe afterwards. So that everybody agrees on the facts. There is no disagreement about facts here. This is not a disagreement about facts. This is a disagreement about law. And there's a disagreement about what it means to own something. Or is ownership of all the rights to the benefits associated with a piece of property, is that true ownership? Or is there something separate? And that's the argument. This is not about an uncertainty. We can talk about it further, God willing, next week.
But
next week, by the way, I'm going to be teaching Monday through Friday. So as a result, we will be in person at 7:45 every morning. Even on Monday, which is a legal holiday, we'll be at 7:45, I believe, unless they change davening times. But I believe that we're going to have regular davening times at 6:40.
We don't know. We don't know who is entitled to the property, the underlying property.
No, that is not. You are not correct. In my opinion,
but then why is there a machloket then? If we don't know it,
because the question is does the right to the benefits of a piece of property effectively equate to owning the underlying property? Rabbi Yochanan says absolutely, and Reish Lakish says absolutely not. Rebbe says absolutely not. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says absolutely. That's exactly what the machlokas is. What is the law associated with this? This is not about uncertainty. Well, some people say this, some people that. That is not the case. This is all right. So I hope that that's clear.
No, I don't. We just don't know if he's entitled to the underlying property or not. We don't know.
No, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's as if he owns the underlying property. There's no question for Rabbi Yochanan. And according to Reish Lakish, he definitely does not. It's not like there's a question and an uncertainty.
But there's a question for us. What they mean?
It's because we stopped in the middle of the daf. In 2 lines, we're going to say what the halacha is. There won't be any uncertainty for us. All right? Okay, we'll talk about it, God willing.
But at this point, we don't know what the final decision is. We don't know whether the property is part of the pay road or not. It goes with the pay road or not.
If what you're saying is at this moment in the Gemara, we don't know yet what the halacha is, 100%. We're about to find out. That's the next line in the
And
Gemara.
one person has
So you
one
have to stay
opinion.
tuned. All right,
One
I
person
gotta
has one
go.
opinion, one
Have a
person has
great
the other
day. Have a
opinion.
good Shabbos.
Yeah.
Be well, everybody.